What the hell are you doing?
If you allow, I can help.
Help!
Dr. Vincent Mercer sneered.
You stinking cockroaches are trying to dress up as doctors here, aren't you?
Harper Brooks stood still.
Get this cockroach out of my ER before she spreads disease.
He snapped his fingers without looking at her. Greg Tanner stepped forward and yanked her backward. Her knees hit the floor.
The bleeding is retroperineal. You're approaching wrong.
Mercer crouched down, eye level.
Little black girl, dogs don't bark in an operating room. Crawl back to whatever cardboard box you came from.
Behind the glass, the monitor flatlined. 2 seconds. Beeped back. 5 surgeons had failed. The patient was the mayor, and the woman on her knees was about to make every one of them beg for her forgiveness. 14 hours earlier, Harper Brooks had eaten her last meal. Half a gas station sandwich pulled from a trash can behind the Sunoco on 5th and Market. She wiped the mustard off with her sleeve, ate it standing in the rain, and kept walking. That was Tuesday. This was Wednesday. The first blizzard of January had buried Ashford under 9 inches of snow, and the temperature dropped to 11 degrees by the time Harper crossed the parking lot of St. Edmund Memorial Hospital. She was not there for medical care. She was there because the automatic doors blew warm air, and warm air meant survival. The waiting room was half full. A teenager with a broken wrist, an old man wheezing into a paper bag, a young mother rocking a feverish toddler. None of them looked at Harper when she sat in the corner seat near the vending machines, the seat closest to the heating vent. She had mapped every hospital lobby in Ashford over 3 years. She knew which ones let you sit longest before security noticed. St. Edmund Memorial was the city's flagship trauma center. 18 operating rooms, 2 helipads, a reputation built on level 1 trauma certification, and a board that donated enough to keep the marble floors polished. The kind of hospital that treated senators and athletes, not the kind that welcomed women who carried everything they owned in a garbage bag. Harper pulled her coat tighter. A men's parka 3 sizes too large, zipper broken, stuffing leaking from a tear along the left shoulder. Underneath, 2 stained sweaters, boots with no laces, fingernails cracked and dark. But her hands, long fingers, precise, still. The hands of a woman who had once held a scalpel the way a violinist holds a bow. 3 years ago, Dr. Harper Brooks had been the youngest chief of vascular surgery in Johns Hopkins history. 42 peer-reviewed papers. The inventor of the Brooks technique, a retroperitoneal approach to infrarenal aortic repair that had saved over 300 lives across 4 continents. Presidential Award for Medical Excellence at 39. Surgeons flew from Tokyo and Berlin to watch her operate. Then, on a Thursday evening in November, a delivery truck ran a red light on Eastern Avenue in Baltimore. Her husband James and her daughter Lily, 7 years old, still in her ballet leotard, died at the scene. Harper arrived at the hospital. She saw the gurney. She saw the small foot hanging off the edge, still wearing a pink ballet shoe. She never operated again. The grief swallowed her in stages. The drinking, the missed shifts, the board review, the suspended license, the emptied office. Friends called for a while, then stopped. The apartment went next, then the car, then the shelters, then the streets. 3 years of concrete and cardboard stripped away everything except one thing. She still read. Medical journals left in clinic waiting rooms, newspapers with health sections, cover to cover, her mind still cataloging, still diagnosing. The surgeon was buried, but not dead. At 9:47 p.m., the helicopter arrived. Harper heard it before anyone else. The specific pitch of a Medivac rotor cutting through a blizzard. She straightened. Old instincts fired before she could stop them. The ER exploded into motion. Nurses sprinted, gurneys rolled. The overhead speaker crackled with a trauma code Harper's brain translated before the sentence finished. Multi-system blunt trauma, hemodynamic instability, massive internal hemorrhage. She watched through the glass as they wheeled the patient in. Male, late 50s, gray suit, soaked in blood. Face swollen, unrecognizable. But the security detail, 4 men in dark suits with earpieces, told her this was not a regular patient. Nurse Elena Davis rushed past. Their eyes met for half a second. Elena did not see a homeless woman. She saw something she could not name. A stillness. The way Harper's eyes tracked the gurney was not curiosity. It was assessment. Dr. Vincent Mercer arrived 90 seconds later, chief of emergency medicine, 22 years at St. Edmund. He walked like the hospital belonged to him. He barked orders without breaking stride, gloves on, pushing through the OR doors. 5 surgeons followed him in. The doors swung shut. The clock started. And in the corner by the vending machines, Harper Brooks leaned forward. Her hands, those long, precise, impossibly still hands, pressed flat against her knees. She already knew what was wrong. She had heard it in the trauma code. She could see it in the blood pattern on the gurney sheet. She just did not know if she was still allowed to care. The first surgeon lasted 11 minutes. Dr. Keith Alderman, senior attending, opened the abdomen and found what the CT scan had already suggested: a ruptured spleen and a torn infrarenal aorta. The spleen was routine. He removed it in 6 minutes. But when he turned to the aorta, the blood came faster than his hands could move. The tear was deep, angular, hidden behind a wall of retroperitoneal tissue that made direct visualization almost impossible. He packed gauze. The gauze soaked through in seconds. He clamped. The clamp slipped. He called for more suction. The suction couldn't keep up. "I can't see the source," he said. His voice was flat, controlled, but his hands told the truth. They were shaking. The second surgeon, Dr. Lydia Marsh, took over at the 23-minute mark. She tried a lateral approach, rotating the bowel medially to expose the aorta from the side. It was a sound technique, textbook, but the anatomy was wrong. The tear was posterior, tucked beneath the left renal vein, and every time she retracted tissue to see it, the bleeding worsened. She worked for 14 minutes before she stepped back and said, "I need another set of eyes." The third surgeon agreed with the second. The fourth disagreed with both. They argued over the table while the patient's blood pressure dropped to 62/38, and the anesthesiologist quietly increased the vasopressors to a dose that would damage the kidneys if maintained for more than an hour. Harper watched all of it through the glass. She had not moved from the corridor. She had positioned herself at the narrow window between OR1 and the hallway, standing where the overhead light created a blind spot in the security camera's field of vision. Greg Tanner had walked past twice without seeing her. She was good at not being seen. 3 years on the streets had taught her that invisibility was the most valuable skill a homeless person could possess. But she was not hiding. She was reading. Every movement the surgeons made, she translated. Every instrument they reached for, she evaluated. Every decision they made, she had already made 3 steps ahead and discarded. She could see the tear in her mind as clearly as if she were standing over the table herself. Posterior infrarenal, 2 centimeters below the left renal artery takeoff. The kind of injury she had written about in her 3rd published paper, the one that had changed the standard of care in 46 trauma centers worldwide. They were all making the same mistake. They were trying to reach the tear from the front, transperitoneal. It was the standard approach, the one taught in every surgical residency in the country. And for 90% of aortic injuries, it worked. But this was the other 10%. The kind where the tear sat so deep behind the peritoneum that every anterior approach just pushed the tissue further apart and made the bleeding worse. The Brooks technique existed for exactly this injury. She had designed it for exactly this moment. The 5th surgeon entered the OR at the 51-minute mark. Dr. Mercer himself. He had scrubbed in with the deliberate slowness of a man who believed his presence alone would change the outcome. He took the instruments from Dr. Marsh without a word, without a thank you, and began working. Harper watched his hands. They were competent, experienced, but they were doing the same thing the others had done. Anterior approach, more retraction, more bleeding, more gauze. She pressed her palm against the glass. Her breath fogged a small circle on the cold surface. "You need to go around," she whispered. No one heard her. "Go around. Left lateral. Mobilize the kidney. You'll see it." Mercer did not go around. He packed tighter. He clamped harder. The monitors screamed louder. That was when Harper made her decision. She walked to the OR door. Not the main entrance, the side door, the one used by nurses bringing supplies. She pushed it open 6 inches. The rush of cold corridor air hit the sterile field, and every head in the room turned. "Who the hell opened that door?" Mercer shouted without looking up. "The tear is posterior infrarenal," Harper said through the gap. Her voice was calm, clinical, the voice of a surgeon delivering a consult. 2 centimeters below the left renal takeoff. You need a left medial visceral rotation. Mobilize the spleen, pancreas, and left kidney en bloc. You'll have direct posterior access in 90 seconds. The room went silent. Not because of what she said, because of how she said it. Every syllable was precise. Every anatomical landmark was exact. This was not a guess. This was not a homeless woman rambling medical terminology she had overheard. This was a diagnosis delivered with the confidence of someone who had seen this injury 100 times. Elena Davis, standing near the instrument tray, looked at Harper. Really looked. Past the matted hair, past the stained coat, past the smell. She saw the eyes. Focused, unblinking, certain. "Dr. Mercer," Elena said carefully, "maybe we should—" "Are you insane?" Mercer snapped. He finally turned and saw Harper in the doorway. His face went from confusion to disgust in half a second. "You? How did you get back in here?" "The patient has less than 15 minutes, Harper said. "At current blood loss rate, his kidneys will fail in 8, his heart in 12. You are running out of time, and you are running out of blood." Mercer ripped off his gloves and walked toward her. He was taller by a foot. He used every inch of it. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice low enough that only she and Elena could hear. "I don't care if God himself walked through that door and told me how to operate. I am not taking advice from a woman who sleeps in a parking garage. You are contaminating my OR. You are risking my patient's life, and if you don't turn around and disappear right now, I will have you arrested for trespassing, and I will make sure you spend the night in a cell instead of whatever sewer you crawled out of." He grabbed her shoulder and pushed her backward into the corridor. The door swung shut. Harper stumbled, caught herself on the wall. Her hands were shaking now, not from cold, not from hunger, but from something she had not felt in 3 years. The absolute certainty that she was right, and no one would listen. She slid down the wall and sat on the floor. Through the glass, she could see the monitors. The numbers were dropping. 60 over 30, 55 over 28. The man on that table was dying, and every second she sat on this floor, he was closer to death. She closed her eyes. She saw Lily's pink ballet shoe hanging off the gurney. She saw James's hand, still wearing his wedding ring, going cold under the hospital lights. She had not been able to save them. She had arrived too late. 4 minutes too late. She opened her eyes. The monitor read 50 over 25. She was not too late, not this time. Harper stood up, her knees cracked. Her vision blurred for a second. Low blood sugar, dehydration, exhaustion. She steadied herself against the wall and walked back toward the OR window. Inside, chaos had replaced procedure. The anesthesiologist was calling out numbers that no one wanted to hear. 48 over 22, heart rate 136, 2 units of O negative left. Dr. Mercer was elbow deep in the abdomen, packing blindly, his jaw clenched so tight the tendons in his neck stood out like cables. The other 4 surgeons stood behind him. None of them reached for an instrument. They had nothing left to try. The clock on the OR wall read 10:38 p.m. The patient had been on the table for 51 minutes. In vascular trauma, the golden window was 60. After that, organ damage became irreversible. They had 9 minutes. Elena Davis was the first to break. She walked out of the OR, pulled off her bloody gloves, and found Harper standing at the window. For 3 seconds, neither of them spoke. Elena looked at Harper's hands. Steady, perfectly steady. In 21 years of surgical nursing, Elena had seen hundreds of pairs of hands. Nervous hands, tired hands, arrogant hands, drunk hands. She had never seen hands that still at a moment like this. "What you said earlier?" Elena whispered. "The left medial visceral rotation. How did you know that?" "Because I invented the procedure." Elena blinked. "What?" "My name is Harper Brooks. I was chief of vascular surgery at Johns Hopkins. I developed the retroperitoneal approach for posterior infrarenal aortic injuries. I published it in the Journal of Trauma and Acute Care Surgery in 2019. It has been used in 46 trauma centers across 12 countries. She paused. I know what that sounds like, coming from someone who looks like me right now. Elena stared at her face. Beneath the grime, beneath the sunken cheeks and cracked lips, there was a composure that did not belong to the streets. It belonged to an operating room. Elena turned and walked back into the OR. Dr. Mercer, I need to tell you something. Not now, Elena. The woman outside. She says she's Dr. Harper Brooks from Johns Hopkins. Mercer didn't look up. And I'm the Pope. Get me more gauze. Dr. Mercer, the patient's pressure is— I know what his pressure is! Mercer's shout echoed off the tiled walls. His hands were shaking now. The great Dr. Mercer, 22 years of authority, was shaking. A clamp slipped from his fingers and clattered into the surgical tray. No one picked it up. In the back of the room, Dr. Samuel Reed, the youngest surgeon on the team, 3 years out of residency, pulled out his phone. He typed 2 words into Google. Harper Brooks. The results loaded in 1.2 seconds. Johns Hopkins Medicine, Department of Surgery, faculty page, archived but still visible. The photo showed a woman in a white coat, hair pulled back, smile confident, name embroidered on the pocket. Dr. Harper Brooks, MD, FACS, Chief of Vascular Surgery. Reed scrolled. Publication list. 42 papers. The Brooks technique, cited 831 times. Presidential Award. Invited lecturer at the European Society for Vascular Surgery. Consultant to the Royal College of Surgeons of England. He scrolled further. A news article from 3 years ago. Baltimore Sun. Renowned Johns Hopkins surgeon loses husband and daughter in hit-and-run accident. Below it, another headline. Dr. Harper Brooks surrenders medical license following extended leave. Reed looked up from his phone. He looked through the OR window at the woman standing in the corridor. Same cheekbones, same jawline, same eyes. Except now they carried 3 years of pavement and hunger and loss. Same person. He walked to the OR monitor and pulled up the hospital's display screen. He cast his phone to it. The faculty photo filled the 60-inch display mounted on the wall above the scrub sink. Every person in the room saw it at the same time. That woman, Reed said, his voice cutting through the noise, is Dr. Harper Brooks, Chief of Vascular Surgery at Johns Hopkins for 6 years, inventor of the Brooks technique, the exact procedure designed for the exact injury this patient has. 42 published papers, Presidential Award recipient. She is standing 15 feet from this table. The room went dead silent. Mercer stared at the screen, at the photo, at the name. His hands stopped moving inside the patient's abdomen. For the first time in 22 years, Vincent Mercer had absolutely nothing to say. The monitor beeped. 44/20. Heart rate 141. The patient was dying. The answer was standing in the hallway, and the only thing between them was one man's pride. 7 seconds of silence. That was how long the room held its breath after Reed's announcement. 7 seconds, in which 12 medical professionals stared at a photograph on a screen, then turned to look through the glass at the woman it belonged to. Mercer broke first, not with words, with a laugh, short, sharp, bitter. I don't care if she cured cancer in a past life. She is not touching my patient. She has no license. She has no credentials. She is a liability and a contamination risk. End of discussion. He turned back to the table, picked up a fresh clamp, reached into the abdomen. The monitor answered him. 42/18, heart rate 148. The ventilator alarm joined in. Oxygen saturation dropping. 89%, 86. Dr. Mercer, the anesthesiologist said. His voice had changed. It was no longer clinical. It was afraid. We have maybe 6 minutes, maybe less. Mercer's clamp slipped again. Blood sprayed across his gown, his mask, the bridge of his glasses. He wiped his face with his forearm and kept working. But the anatomy defeated him the same way it had defeated the 4 before him. The tear was behind the kidney. He could not see it. He could not reach it. And every second he spent trying, the patient bled more. Reed stepped forward. Sir, with respect, she invented the only technique that can get out of my OR, Reed. The patient is going to die. Get out! Reed did not get out. He walked to the OR door and opened it. Harper was still standing at the window. She had not moved. She had not paced. She had not looked away. Her eyes were locked on the monitors the way a pilot watches instruments during a nosedive, with total focus and zero panic. Dr. Brooks, Reed said. He used the title deliberately, loudly enough for the entire room to hear. Will you help us? Harper looked at him, then past him into the OR, at the table, at the blood, at the monitors counting down a man's life in falling numbers. He won't let me in, she said. He doesn't have a choice anymore. Elena appeared behind Reed. She was holding a sealed surgical gown, still in its sterile packaging. She held it out to Harper without a word. Their eyes met. Elena nodded once. Harper took the gown. Her fingers closed around the plastic. She felt the familiar crinkle of sterile packaging, a texture she had not touched in 3 years. Her throat tightened. Her chest ached, but her hands did not shake. She walked into the OR. Every head turned. The scrub nurse, the anesthesiologist, the 4 surgeons standing along the wall like soldiers who had lost a battle, and Mercer, still at the table, his gloves red to the wrists. Get her out, Mercer said, but his voice had lost something. The command was still there, the conviction was not. Then let your patient die, Harper said. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Or step aside. The words landed like a scalpel on skin, clean, precise. Final. Mercer stared at her. She stared back. 3 years of homelessness had taken many things from Harper Brooks. Her home, her career, her family, her dignity. Piece by piece, stripped away by shelter lines and soup kitchens and men like Greg Tanner who touched her like she was garbage. But it had not taken this. The ability to stand in front of a dying patient and know, with absolute, unshakable certainty, that she was the only person in the room who could save him. Mercer looked at the monitor. 38/16. He looked at the photo on the screen. He looked at the woman standing in front of him in a stained coat and laceless boots. He stepped back. It was the smallest movement, half a step, but it was the largest concession Vincent Mercer had ever made in his career. Harper moved to the scrub sink. She turned on the water. It was warm. She had not felt warm water on her hands in months. She scrubbed. The iodine foam turned brown as 3 years of street grime washed down the drain. Underneath her skin was raw. Underneath her skin, the muscle memory was intact. She scrubbed for exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds, the standard surgical scrub time. Not 3 minutes, not 5. 4:30. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget. Elena helped her gown. Gloves, size 6.5. Harper flexed her fingers inside the latex. The fit was perfect. The sensation was overwhelming. She closed her eyes for 1 second, just one. Behind her eyelids, she saw the last time she had worn surgical gloves, the day before the accident. A routine aneurysm repair. Patient survived. She had gone home, kissed Lily goodnight, and told James she would be late the next evening because she had a conference call with the surgical team in Munich. The next evening, James and Lily were dead. She opened her eyes. The OR lights were blinding white. The monitors were screaming. The patient's life was measured in minutes now, not hours. Harper stepped to the table. She looked down at the open abdomen. Blood everywhere. Gauze everywhere. Clamps placed wrong, retractors angled wrong, suction positioned wrong. A mess. But beneath the mess, she could see the anatomy as clearly as a blueprint. "Retract the descending colon medially," she said. Her voice filled the room. It was not loud. It was not soft. It was the voice of someone who had given 10,000 commands in 10,000 operations and had never once been wrong about where to cut. Elena moved before the words finished. She had been waiting for that voice her entire career without knowing it. "Release the lateral peritoneal attachments along the white line of Tolt." The scrub nurse handed instruments before Harper asked for them. She was reading Harper's hands the way a jazz musician reads a band leader. "Mobilize the left kidney, spleen, and pancreatic tail en bloc. Rotate anteriorly." The organs shifted. The field opened. And there it was. The tear. 2 centimeters of ripped aortic wall, posterior, exactly where Harper had said it would be from the other side of a glass window. Every surgeon in the room saw it at the same time. The thing they had been searching for over an hour, hidden behind tissue they had been afraid to move. Mercer saw it too. He said nothing, but he picked up a retractor and held it exactly where Harper needed it without being asked. It was the closest thing to an apology he knew how to give. Harper's first incision was a revelation. She did not cut the way the others had cut. She did not hack or force or wrestle with the tissue. She moved through it the way water moves through a riverbed, following the natural planes, separating layers that were meant to be separated, finding spaces between structures that the other surgeons had not known existed. Dr. Keith Alderman, the first surgeon who had tried and failed, leaned over to Dr. Lydia Marsh. "I've never seen anyone mobilize a retroperitoneal field that fast," he whispered. Marsh did not respond. She was watching Harper's left hand. It was holding a retractor at an angle that should not have worked, 30 degrees off the standard position, but it gave her right hand an unobstructed path to the aorta that none of them had been able to achieve in an hour of trying. "That's the Brooks technique," Marsh said quietly. "I read about it in residency. I never thought I'd see it performed." Outside the OR, the news was spreading. Elena had told the charge nurse had told the floor supervisor had called the chief medical officer at home. Within 15 minutes, the hallways of St. Edmund Memorial were electric with whispers. "The homeless woman is a surgeon. Not just a surgeon. She was chief of vascular at Hopkins. She invented the technique they're using right now. She won the presidential award. She's been living on the streets for 3 years." Greg Tanner heard it at the security desk. He had been filling out a report. Trespasser removed from OR corridor. Description: black female, approximately 40 to 50 years old, disheveled, possible mental health issues. His pen stopped. He read the name on his phone screen. Dr. Harper Brooks. He looked at the security footage from 40 minutes earlier, himself grabbing her collar, dragging her across the floor, her knees hitting the linoleum. He looked at the photo from Johns Hopkins, the same woman in a white coat standing in front of a surgical team holding an award. His face went gray. He put down the pen. He did not finish the report. Inside the OR, Harper was working with a speed and precision that made the room feel like a masterclass. Every movement had purpose. Every instrument was used once and placed down. No hesitation, no wasted motion. The scrub nurse had stopped anticipating. She was simply following, handing Harper whatever she reached for, trusting a rhythm she had never encountered before but recognized instantly as genius. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Paul Whitfield, watched the monitors. For the first time in 90 minutes, the numbers had stopped falling. Blood pressure held at 40/20, not improving, but not dropping. Harper had stopped the active hemorrhage in under 4 minutes. The tear was clamped, not from the front, where 5 surgeons had failed, but from behind, through the retroperitoneal space, exactly as her published technique described. "Pressure stabilizing," Whitfield said. He said it like a prayer. Reed stood at the back of the room, his phone still in his hand. He had pulled up another article, a profile from the New England Journal of Medicine, published 2 years before the accident. The title read, "Harper Brooks and the Future of Vascular Surgery: How One Surgeon is Rewriting the Rules." The article called her the most innovative vascular surgeon of her generation. It quoted the chair of surgery at Massachusetts General. "In 20 years, every trauma center in the world will be using her techniques. She is not ahead of her time. She is the time." Reed looked at the woman standing at the table, wearing a surgical gown over a stained coat, operating in boots with no laces, hair matted, unwashed, pulled back with a rubber band she had found on the corridor floor. She is the time. Outside, the first media van arrived. Someone inside the hospital had posted on social media a single sentence, no names. A homeless woman just took over surgery on the mayor at St. Edmund Memorial. Within 8 minutes, it had 4,000 shares. Within 12, CNN had a crew en route. Within 15, the hashtag homeless surgeon was trending in 3 states. Inside the OR, Harper did not know any of this. She did not care. The only thing that existed was the tear, the clamp, and the next step. The bleeding had stopped, but the repair had not yet begun. The repair began at 11:14 p.m. The tear was clamped, but not closed. Clamping was triage. Closing was surgery. And this closure would require something that no one in that room except Harper Brooks had ever attempted. The aortic wall was shredded along a 2-centimeter line, posterior, tucked beneath the left renal vein. Standard repair would mean a synthetic graft, a tube of Dacron or PTFE sewn over the damaged section. But the angle was impossible for a graft. The space was too narrow. The surrounding tissue was too swollen from an hour of failed manipulation by 5 surgeons who had pushed and retracted and bruised everything around the tear. A graft would not hold. It would leak. And a leak meant death within hours. Harper knew this in the first 30 seconds. She also knew the alternative. Primary repair. Direct suturing of the aortic wall, stitch by stitch, in a space smaller than a tennis ball, behind the kidney, beneath the renal vein, with 0 margin for error. 1 stitch too deep would puncture the posterior wall and create a second tear. 1 stitch too shallow would not hold against arterial pressure. The gap between success and catastrophe was measured in fractions of a millimeter. She had done this 14 times in her career, 12 successes, 2 failures. Both failures had happened early before she refined the technique. The last 8 had been perfect. The last one had been 3 years and 4 months ago. "I need 50 Prolene on an SH needle," she said. "Continuous running suture. I'll start inferior and work up." Elena handed her the needle driver. Their fingers touched for a fraction of a second through the gloves. Elena squeezed. Harper did not react outwardly, but somewhere inside the wreckage of 3 years, something shifted. A door that had been sealed shut cracked open just enough to let in light. She placed the first stitch. The room held its breath. 12 people, motionless, watching a needle pierce the wall of the largest artery in the human body with the delicacy of a seamstress threading silk. The first stitch held. Harper tied it, moved 2 millimeters superior, placed the second. "Pressure?" she asked without looking up. 42/20, Whitfield said. "Holding." Third stitch. Fourth. Each one placed with identical spacing, identical depth, identical tension. The rhythm was hypnotic. Alderman, watching from the back, found himself counting under his breath. 5, 6, 7. Each stitch took approximately 18 seconds. Each one was a small act of defiance against death. Then the first complication hit. At stitch number 9, the tissue tore. Not at the suture line, 2 centimeters lateral, where the retraction damage from the earlier attempts had weakened the aortic wall. A new tear. Small, 1 centimeter. But in a vessel carrying the body's entire blood supply, 1 centimeter was a catastrophe. Blood filled the field instantly. The monitors screamed. Pressure dropped from 42 to 31 in 4 seconds. "Suction," Harper said. Her voice did not change. "More light. Angle the overhead 30 degrees left." She did not panic. She did not freeze. She clamped the new tear with her left hand while her right hand continued the primary repair. 2 operations simultaneously. 2 hands working independently, each performing a different task with a different rhythm, like a pianist playing 2 different melodies at once. Marsh whispered to Alderman, "That's not possible." Alderman did not answer. He was watching something he would later describe in a letter to the Journal of Trauma as the single most extraordinary display of surgical skill I have witnessed in 31 years of practice. Harper repaired the secondary tear in 90 seconds. 8 stitches, placed blind. She could not see the tear directly because her right hand was still working on the primary repair. She sutured by feel, by memory, by the map of human anatomy that lived in her fingertips the way music lives in a pianist's hands. The bleeding stopped. Both tears sealed. "Pressure?" Harper said. 34/20, rising, slowly. Then the second complication. The heart monitor changed its rhythm. The steady beeping fractured into chaos. Ventricular fibrillation. The patient's heart, starved of blood for too long, had given up trying to beat properly and was now quivering uselessly in his chest. "Defib," Whitfield announced, already reaching for the internal paddles. "We need to shock." "Not yet," Harper said. "Give me 60 seconds. "He doesn't have 60 seconds. His brain is losing perfusion right now. He needs defibrillation immediately." "If you shock him now, the vibration will tear every stitch I just placed. We'll be back to 0, worse than 0. He'll bleed out on this table in under 2 minutes. Give me 60 seconds to reinforce the suture line, then shock." Whitfield looked at Mercer. Mercer looked at Harper. For a moment, the old hierarchy reasserted itself. The anesthesiologist waiting for the chief's permission, the chief weighing his authority against the judgment of a woman he had called a cockroach 40 minutes ago. Mercer nodded. "Give her the 60 seconds. It was the second concession of the night. This one cost him more than the first, because this time he was not just stepping aside. He was trusting her with a life. Harper worked. 58 seconds. Reinforcement stitches along the primary repair line, quick, precise, brutal in their efficiency. She placed 11 stitches in under a minute, each one a guarantee that the wall would hold against the electric shock about to slam through the patient's chest. "Now," she said. Whitfield charged the paddles, placed them directly on the heart. "Clear." The shock hit. 200 joules. The patient's body jerked on the table. The monitors went flat. 1 second. 2. 3. 4. Harper stared at the suture line, holding. No leak, no tear. The stitches held. On the 5th second, the heart restarted. Sinus rhythm, steady, strong. The most beautiful rhythm in medicine. "Pressure rising," Whitfield said, his voice cracked. 46/24. 50/28, climbing. The room exhaled. Someone whispered, "Thank God," under their breath. No one knew who. But Harper did not stop. She was already addressing the 3rd complication, the one no one else had noticed. The left kidney, deprived of adequate blood flow for over 90 minutes, was showing signs of ischemic damage. The renal artery had been partially compressed by the clamp placement from the earlier failed attempts. If she did not restore full flow within the next few minutes, the mayor would survive the surgery, but lose the kidney. And losing a kidney after a surgery like this often meant dialysis. And dialysis meant a slow, diminished life. She repositioned the clamps, adjusted the retraction, released the renal artery compression with a maneuver so subtle that only Elena, standing directly beside her, could see what she had done. "Urine output?" Harper asked. The Foley bag had been empty for an hour. Elena checked. 30 seconds passed. A minute. The tubing remained clear, empty. Then a single drop appeared. Golden. Then another. Then a thin, steady stream. "Output resuming," Elena said. She was smiling behind her mask. Her eyes said everything. Harper closed her eyes for 1 second. The kidney was alive. The heart was beating. The aorta was sealed. The patient, whoever he was going to live. She placed the final stitches, closed the retroperitoneal space, checked every clamp, every suture, every drain. Her hands moved through the closing procedure with the automatic precision of a ritual performed 10,000 times. At 1:22 a.m., 3 hours and 35 minutes after she had first said, "If you allow, I can help," Harper Brooks placed the last suture, cut the thread, and set down the needle driver. "Close the abdomen," she said to Alderman. "Standard fascia closure. JP drains ×2. He'll need ICU monitoring for 72 hours minimum. Watch the creatinine. The left kidney took a hit, but output is resuming. Keep the vasopressors on a slow taper." She stepped back from the table, pulled off her gloves, then the gown. Underneath, her stained sweaters, her broken coat, her boots with no laces. The OR was silent. 12 people stood motionless. The monitors beeped steadily, the most beautiful sound any of them had ever heard. Then Alderman began to clap. Slow, deliberate. 1 person. Then Marsh joined. Then the scrub nurse. Then Whitfield. Then Reed. One by one, every person in that operating room began to applaud. Every person except 2. Mercer, who stood with his arms at his sides staring at the floor, and Harper, who walked out of the OR without looking back, sat down on the corridor floor, pressed her back against the cold wall, and wept. Not for the patient, not for the surgery, not for the applause she did not stay to hear. For Lily, for James, for the 3 years she had spent believing she would never hold a scalpel again, and for the terrifying, overwhelming realization that the thing she thought had died inside her was still alive. Richard Calloway opened his eyes at 6:41 a.m. The first thing he saw was white. White ceiling, white lights, white sheets. The second thing he saw was a tube in his arm and a machine beeping beside his bed. The third thing he saw was his wife, Margaret, asleep in a chair with mascara dried in streaks down her face. He tried to speak. His throat was raw from the intubation tube. He managed one word. "What?" Margaret woke up. She grabbed his hand and started crying. The kind of crying that comes from a place beyond relief, the kind that says, "I already started grieving you." "You were in an accident," she said. Your car hit black ice on the highway. They brought you here by helicopter. You almost... She stopped. She could not say the word. A nurse came in, then a doctor, then another doctor. They checked his vitals, adjusted his drains, asked him to squeeze their fingers. Everything functioned. The surgery had been flawless. It was Reed who told him, "Mr. Mayor, you should know what happened last night." Reed pulled up a chair. He spoke carefully, precisely, the way someone speaks when they know every word matters. He told Calloway about the 5 surgeons who had tried and failed, about the tear that no one could reach, about the woman who had walked in from the cold and said 5 words that saved his life. "Her name is Dr. Harper Brooks," Reed said. "She was chief of vascular surgery at Johns Hopkins. She lost her family 3 years ago. She's been living on the streets ever since. Last night, she performed a procedure that no one else in this hospital, possibly no one else in this state, could have performed. She saved your life, sir." Calloway was quiet for a long time. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at the monitors. He looked at the IV line delivering blood that someone had donated so that he could keep living. "Where is she now?" he asked. Reed hesitated. "We don't know. She left the hospital after the surgery. She didn't give anyone a phone number. She didn't ask for anything. She just walked out into the snow." Calloway closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "Find her," he said, "whatever it takes. Find her." They found her the next morning, sitting on a bench outside the Greyhound station on Wexford Avenue, 3 blocks from the hospital. She had not slept. Her coat was dusted with snow. She was holding a cup of cold coffee that someone had left on the bench hours ago. 2 police officers approached. She flinched. 3 years of being told to move along had trained that reflex. But these officers were not there to move her along. The mayor had made a phone call at 7 a.m. from his ICU bed. Within 30 minutes, every patrol car in the city had her description. "Dr. Brooks," the first officer said. He used the title. "Mayor Calloway is asking for you." Harper looked at them. She did not understand why they were smiling. By the time she returned to St. Edmund Memorial, the world had changed. The lobby was surrounded by news vans, CNN, NBC, Fox, local affiliates from 6 states. The hashtag homeless surgeon had reached #1 nationally overnight. The security footage of Greg Tanner dragging her across the floor had leaked and been viewed 14 million times. The comment section was a wall of fury. Greg Tanner was terminated at 8:15 a.m. Gross misconduct, excessive force, discriminatory behavior. He was escorted from the building by the same colleagues who had laughed 12 hours earlier. None of them were laughing now. Dr. Vincent Mercer submitted his resignation as Chief of Emergency Medicine at 9 a.m. The board rejected it, not out of mercy, but because they wanted the authority to fire him publicly as part of an institutional review into discriminatory practices. The review would result in 3 additional terminations and mandatory bias training for every employee in the hospital. Calloway met with Harper in his ICU room. Door closed, no cameras, no press, just the mayor in his hospital gown and the woman who saved his life still wearing her broken coat. They spoke for 45 minutes. No one knows exactly what was said, but when Harper walked out of that room, she was carrying a business card with Calloway's personal number written on the back, and a promise. Within 2 weeks, Calloway's office had contacted the Maryland State Board of Physicians. Harper's license suspension had been based on abandonment of practice and failure to complete a psychiatric evaluation, not malpractice, not patient harm. Calloway made sure she had legal representation, an evaluation appointment, and a place to live while the process unfolded. The psychiatrist's conclusion after 3 sessions was direct. Dr. Brooks had experienced acute grief-related major depressive disorder following the death of her husband and daughter. She had not received treatment. She had self-medicated with alcohol and eventually stabilized on her own, without therapy, without medication, without a home. Her performance at St. Edmund demonstrated not only retained clinical competence, but extraordinary composure under extreme physiological and psychological stress. Her license was reinstated on a Tuesday. She read the letter standing in the kitchen of the one-bedroom apartment on Clement Street that Calloway's office had helped her secure, 4 blocks from the hospital. She read it twice. Then she folded it and placed it on the counter next to the only thing she had unpacked, a photograph of James and Lily at the beach, taken the summer before the accident. Lily was mid-laugh, sand on her cheeks, James holding her upside down by the ankles. Harper touched the photograph with her fingertip. Then she picked up the phone and called St. Edmund Memorial. "This is Dr. Harper Brooks," she said. "I'd like to accept the position." On her first morning as Chief of Vascular Surgery at St. Edmund Memorial, Harper Brooks arrived at 5:30 a.m. White coat, name embroidered on the pocket, hair cut short, pulled back, boots with laces. She carried a leather bag that Margaret Calloway had sent with a note, "For the woman who gave me back my husband." She walked through the same automatic doors she had entered 4 weeks earlier looking for warm air. Same lobby, same linoleum, same heating vent where she had sat, invisible. She was not invisible now. The new security guard stood when she passed. "Good morning, Dr. Brooks." She nodded and kept walking. Her office was on the 4th floor, corner room, 2 windows overlooking the parking lot where she had once slept in a doorway. She set down her bag, opened the top drawer, and placed inside it the photograph of James and Lily at the beach. The same photograph that had traveled through 3 years of shelters and sidewalks, folded so many times the crease ran through Lily's laughing face. She smoothed it flat, closed the drawer, put on her surgical cap, and went to meet her first patient. The chart read, female, 19 years old, no fixed address, ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm, almost unheard of at that age. No insurance, no family contact, no visitors. The girl had been living on the streets for 2 years. Harper walked into the room. The girl looked up from the bed with wide, scared eyes, the eyes of someone who had learned that hospitals were places where people like her were told to leave. Harper pulled up a chair. She sat down. She did not stand over her. She did not check the chart first. She looked the girl in the eyes. "I'm Dr. Brooks. I'm going to take care of you. And I'm not going anywhere." The girl's lip trembled. She did not speak. She just reached out and grabbed Harper's hand. Harper held it, the way no one had held hers. #Justice for Harper. If you've ever been judged for how you look instead of what you carry inside, share this story. Someone out there needs to hear it tonight. If this hit you, drop a comment. What would you have done if you saw Harper Brooks in that ER hallway? And if you haven't already, subscribe. Stories like this don't tell themselves. The next one might change how you see the world.
The story is over, but one thing keeps sticking with me. We usually look at somebody at rock bottom and think that's who they are. Homeless means broken. Struggling means incapable. We see somebody's worst chapter and the sum is their whole story. But the story showed me something different. Nobody is their worst chapter. Nobody. The woman on the street corner isn't a homeless person. She's a person who became homeless. There's a universe between those two sentences. One is an identity, the other is a thing that happened. And the thing that happened doesn't erase everything that came before it. That's what gets me. We do this constantly. We meet somebody in their hard decision and freeze them there. The guy who lost his job must not be very good. The woman who fell apart after a loss must be weak. The kid who dropped out must not be smart. We take one frame from somebody's life and call it the whole movie. It's never the whole movie. Behind every person you have written off, there's a story you didn't ask about. A career, a family, a talent, a life that looked completely different before the things that broke them. So this week, before you decide who somebody is, ask what happened to them. You will be amazed how different the answers sound from what you assumed. If you had been in the hallway, would you have listened? I read every command. Hit like, subscribe. See you next time.